Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 management stories for you from the ProRevenge subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. If you enjoy true crime stories, make sure to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, also available on all major podcasting platforms. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Deadlock 1989. Pass me for manager promotion and hire your useless credit-stealing friend? I'll destroy your career. So this is not my story, but due to the nature of events, I don't mind my account being made into a sacrificial lamb if it got back to people involved, as my account is essentially expendable. So, the story. Dave, not real name, has been working for an IT programming company for just over 9 years, getting a good rep as a hard worker, and all his colleagues knew him and can trust him to be a big help in times of trouble, like during big difficult projects for major clients. Dave's manager John was planning to retire and thought Dave would be a good replacement, so put his name forward as a recommendation and started showing him the ropes of his potential new job, just to give him a glimpse of what he may be asked to undertake. A month later, John puts in his notice of retirement and Dave's department manager, Michael, starts the interview process. Some character info: whilst John was a good manager, very people-friendly, Michael was not. All Michael cared about was numbers and reports. He didn't even know who most of his staff was, nor did he have much interaction with them. Back to the story, Michael had started the interviews to fill John's position, Dave being one of the interviewees, and Dave thought the interview went really well. A few nervous months later, Michael announces the new manager. It's an outside employment, not an internal promotion. Dave was disappointed, but brushed it off as, there is always someone better for the job. But in less than a week, he realized just how wrong he was. The new manager, Darren, was below useless. He didn't know how to spell computer program, let alone write one. Turns out he was old friends with Michael, and Michael had helped him fabricate his resume to get him the job. The news quickly spread to all the programmers, but there was nothing they could do, as Michael was the person all complaints had to go through, and he buried all of them. So no one above Michael knew of Darren's incompetence. Darren from day one had been pushing all his work onto others, and then claiming credit for the work they had done, getting bonuses for completed work he didn't deserve. Darren spent his days watching movies, napping, playing games, and occasionally pretending to be a manager when the need arose, but never wrote a single line of code. After 3 months of this, the extra workload was starting to affect Dave and the others, but talking to Michael would do nothing. So Dave devised a plan to sort it out. Time for the ProRevenge. Dave had talked with all the other programmers and agreed next time Darren pushed a major project onto them to purposely sabotage the work. Not in a big way, just enough to cause some bugs and glitches that will really light a fire under Michael and Darren. It took about another month, but a really big project came in. Immediately, Darren started pushing his work onto others and stealing credit. So the plan was put into action. It was easy to accomplish, especially as Darren had no clue about coding and Michael didn't care as long as the project was done in good time. The project was done, saved, and sent to the client, with almost all of the major work credit being stolen by Darren. It took less than 2 days for the client to call back complaining about how the new program has damaged his systems and was wreaking havoc on his company. The client wanted it fixed and a full refund. The bosses were pissed at Michael. Michael tried to shift the blame onto Darren. Darren tried to shift the blame onto the programmers. Dave and the programmers just pointed out the program wasn't their project and denied any involvement in its development, which brought the attention back to Darren. The fallout, with the bosses coming down on Darren for what happened, he confessed he lied on his resume, and he ratted out Michael about how he helped him fabricate it. Dave and the programmers denied any wrongdoing, just stating Darren must have damaged the program somehow. Michael and Darren were promptly fired and replaced. Dave and the rest fixed the errors that Darren had created, and the client was happy. In the end, Dave didn't get the promotion, but left the company a year later for a better job. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called RoseGold88. It says, "Aw man, he still didn't get the promotion. What a bummer. Even in stories of revenge, I like the magical unicorn type endings, laughing my butt off." Another commenter called Zorby1 said, "Michael was just dumb. When managers hire buddies, they may not be the best candidate for the job, but they do tend to have some competence. He hired someone who didn't know how to do the job, and it backfired. Lying on the resume is always a no-no, especially in large corporations and government departments. I've read cases where someone was hired, worked for years, and then it was found out that they never graduated from the college they claimed. They could do the job, and have done so for years, but had to resign or be fired." I kind of feel bad for the customer in this case who got burned because OP needed to teach somebody a lesson. However, this is ProRevenge, and it did get the job done. I don't know, if you're on YouTube, comment down below and let me know if that was fair to the client or not. This story comes to us from McNew. "My manager was an awful person to me, but I got her fired in an embarrassing fashion. Years ago, shortly after I graduated high school, I got a new job to support myself during college. This new gig was in a pet store, and I was working in the department that sold the fish, aquariums, reptiles, and birds, etc., etc. The store manager was an awesome guy who I will call Kurt. Kurt was an old school guy. He went to work, worked hard, and went home. That's all he expected out of you as well. My immediate manager over my department was this large snaggletooth witch of a woman. I'll call her Stephanie. We got off to a bad start because she quickly found out that I knew more about reptiles than her. She preferred fish, whereas I had kept snakes for the past 4 or 5 years. Her ego couldn't handle a fresh employee not needing her guidance. From then on, she was terrible to me. She singled me out to clean the goldfish tanks and had the other employees cover sales every day I worked. She would say rude things to me such as, "You are the weak link in my team. You are the reason I'm having problems in this department." Fast forward about a year, my hours had been cut by about 25%. I asked the store manager what the deal was, and he told me that our department had lost too much money between lack of sales and broken merchandise, etc. This puzzled me, but I didn't think much of it because everybody's hours were cut. Simultaneously, myself and a few coworkers had noticed something strange. Stephanie had recently taken much more interest in the customers. She insisted on helping certain customers and sending us to do busy work while they were there. A customer came in one evening and was talking to us about how nice Stephanie is. Turns out, Stephanie was breeding mice and selling them to customers outside of the store. We found out she was breeding all of her animals, her dogs, turtles, mice, and selling them to customers she met through our store. Not only was this taking business from us, our store had a couple of corporate policies. We did not feed nor sell mice as live food for snakes, and we donated a lot of time and money to shelters, and we condemned breeding dogs and cats for sales. Stephanie was making money by selling animals to the customers, all while her department had hours cut for all of its employees. It didn't quite make sense how this was costing us so much money until one evening I thought I had figured it out. Stephanie was an otherwise lazy woman, but when one of her customers came in, she was by their side the whole time. I watched closely as she followed a customer around, helping them pick out a cart full of expensive aquarium decorations and terrarium supplies, like lights and bulbs. I followed and wrote down every item she grabbed. I wanted to see where this went. She directed the customer to a register and went to check them out. She's lazy and would never do this for any other customers. I noted the time and went back to work. I later spoke to other cashiers about Stephanie checking customers out, and they say that she only ever rang up certain customers, and she acted weird when they did it. They suspected she was abusing coupons for them or applying hefty discounts. I got my coworkers to corroborate my story about the under-the-table animal sales and suspicious behavior, and I went to talk to Kurt. I handed him a paper with about 20 UPCs and the time written on it, and I said, "I think if you look up a transaction from Register 2 at this time last night, you will find a large discount applied to it. These are the items I would expect you to find on that transaction. He was a bit puzzled, and I explained everything to him. I told him I didn't want to make any accusations before because I wasn't sure. But after seeing her in action, I was pretty sure something was going on. He thanked me and assured me he would look into it. A couple weeks later, I was at work and I noticed Kurt was standing near the door watching closely. It just so happens Stephanie was coming in for her shift right about that time. The second she walked through the door, he called her over to his office. Apparently, waiting in his office was a regional manager from corporate. He looked at the list I gave him and looked up transactions from the night before. He found one at the exact time I wrote, but it only had about half of the items I listed. But every item that was on that receipt was on the list I gave him. This prompted him to watch her for a few weeks, and in that time frame, they found her to be taking her customers around shopping, personally taking them up to the register, and scanning every other item and putting the expensive stuff into the cart without ringing it up. In that time span, she had given away over $1,500 in merchandise. He looked back at the logs we keep for broken merchandise that is written off and found an excessive amount of aquarium supplies and decorations that were signed off by her. It was something like 1,000% more written off broken merchandise than was found at the same time last quarter. All in all, she was charged with stealing and defrauding the store in over $3,500 in merchandise, and it just so happened that Kurt had already arranged for police to meet them after firing her to escort her out. I don't know if she went to jail, but I did watch her get walked out by the police with about 20 employees staring. I wish I could have said something, but I had to settle for her making eye contact with me as she walked out, to which I gave her a quick wink. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called ZMAT28. It says, "If I've learned anything from this subreddit, it's that documenting things and establishing a paper trail is the key to absolute domination. Well done." OP responded to this one and said, "Definitely. Always make sure you have your own copy of the paper trail. I went home and copied my UPC list so that I'd have it in case it got lost. If you have emails on your work servers, print them or forward them to a secure email account." We've harped on that many times on this channel about documenting everything because it's the best way to cover your butt. But one thing to mention about the emails is that your company might have a policy that prohibits you from sending emails to outside accounts. So keep that in mind. You might not want to forward them to your personal accounts because that might get you canned immediately. It's better to print them and have a hard copy that you can store somewhere and bring it out later on if you need it. I also want to touch back on something that OP said near the beginning of this story, where they said they were really good with handling reptiles. Yep, you proved it. You got rid of the slimiest one of them all. This story comes to us from Merc35802. "Senior manager gets me fired. I turn things around and get her job and salary, plus see her break down, and then let her know exactly how I got my revenge." I was hired by a company as an assistant manager, a job I was well qualified for. The owner is rarely on site as he owns several businesses. The company is run by a GM who hired me, but who works mostly second shift, and who I therefore would have little daily contact with since I was hired for first shift. I was assigned to Eva for training. Eva was a manager and had been with the company 5 years. I trained with her for a few days and then I was on my own, though she and I had overlapping shifts and would see each other a few days a week. We were friendly but not close. After a few months, I was doing well at my job and had even gotten some new procedures adopted to help boost sales. Eva began to act resentful. She would correct me for small things and took any opportunity to remind me that she had trained me. It didn't matter to me. She wasn't my boss. I reported to the GM, so I mostly just ignored her. What I didn't know was that Eva was not just tight with the GM, but they had worked together at another place for 10 years before this one. One day at shift end, GM asks to talk. Tells me it's not working out. Says I'm still making mistakes at 6 months that I shouldn't be. I asked for examples. A few of them were petty matters Eva had mentioned, but most of them were just not true. I tried to argue, but it was clear that I was set up. I decided to reach out to the owner since I had nothing to lose. He was sympathetic but said he relies on GM to run the business and had to support her decision. Then he mentioned that if things hadn't been so bad between me and Eva, it probably could have worked out. That's when I knew she was behind me being fired from a job I needed, really liked, and was making great money, and I vowed to get revenge. I started searching her online info. In less than an hour, I had uncovered gold thanks to one of those pay services. About 3 months prior, Eva was arrested and charged with DWI in a neighboring state. The court record showed she had a hearing coming up in a few weeks. That was enough to get her fired. It affects a professional license she and I had to have as management. Per state law, license holders must report criminal charges to the licensing board. And in the case of a DWI arrest, licenses are typically suspended pending trial. I called the owner and told him what I discovered. It was news to him. I guess since it was out of state, Eva was keeping it secret. Maybe she was hoping to get let off the charges. The next day, the owner called and said Eva was fired. He thanked me for telling him about her DWI, apologized for how I was fired, and offered me Eva's position and salary. He asked me to come in the next morning to meet with him and to cover Eva's shift. I accepted. That alone was sweetly satisfying revenge. But what happened next was the icing on the cake. I got to work extra early, met with the owner and GM, and we all agreed to start fresh. Cool. It was still an hour before opening, and I was in the back of the place when I heard the front door chime. When I came out a few minutes later, Eva was there, tears flowing, begging the owner for her job back. She obviously didn't know I was there because when she saw me, her whole body seized, and her shocked expression was priceless. I walked right by her, staring her down with a crap-eating grin, and went outside. Eva came out a minute later and wouldn't make eye contact. As she walked away, I said, "Good luck on the 23rd. That was her court date. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called MDE132. It says, "Just remember, you're still working for the guy who didn't care about you until he needed you bad." Another commenter down below called Couch Jitsu said, "It's cool and all, but as an outside observer, I have reservations about the owner. He liked you enough to immediately give you Eva's job, but he wouldn't do anything when you were fired. And since he delegates everything to the GM, you could wind up in the same situation. The GM could fire you on a whim, and it doesn't seem like the owner has much interest in stepping up to prevent that." Yeah, this just sounds like they were in a tight situation because they had to fire Eva, and OP was the only one who would know how to at least do part of that job, instead of them trying to bring somebody in and train them with nobody there who knows how to do the training. Also remember that GM and Eva worked together for over 15 years, 10 years at a previous place and 5 years at the current one. That GM is a good friend of Eva's. They are going to make your life hell. If not, they're going to get somebody in, get them trained, and you're going to be out of there faster than you know what's going on. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. Remember to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, where we just released our 5th episode last night. It can be found on all major podcasting platforms. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.